And good morning. I'm Steve Lance. We have some breaking news for you. Tehran vowing to defend itself. This after President Trump said he, quote, obliterated Iran's main nuclear sites in strikes overnight. These historic bombings mean the United States has officially joined its ally Israel in its actions against Iran. Iran's foreign minister now saying diplomacy not an option and that he'll be traveling to Moscow today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Right now, we're anticipating a debrief from the Pentagon in just moments. We will bring that to you as soon as it comes. President Trump also calling on Iran to surrender, saying Iran now has just two options, peace or tragedy. The United States used B-2 stealth planes to fly out its bunker buster bombs on Saturday, the only weapon able to penetrate deep into Iran's underground facilities. The bomb hit three key sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, with Trump calling it a spectacular military success. Natanz is a major uranium enrichment site with three underground structures. Fordow, however, was the main target, with halls nearly 300 feet below ground. Satellite images analyzed by AP showed damage at the entry sites to Fordow. Meantime, Isfahan is suspected to be the headquarters of Iran's nuclear program and was built with the help of China in 1984. Days before the strikes, the Trump administration began to signal that diplomacy with Iran was on thin ice. And on Thursday, the president saying he would make a decision in the next 2 weeks after a back-channel meeting with Iranian officials fell through. Iran's first military response was launching a barrage of missiles at Israel. The two nations have been trading strikes over the past 10 days. Israel saying intelligence indicating that Iran began to weaponize its nuclear program in earnest in the past few months. With Iran vowing to respond, Trump is warning that any retaliation, quote, will be met with force far greater than the bombs last night. He emphasized that the goal of the operation was to take out, quote, nuclear threat posed by the #1 state sponsor of terror. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling the United States bombing peace through strength. Joining us now to discuss these breaking developments, we're happy to have Bart Marcois. He's a former career diplomat and Energy Department official. Also with us is Israeli legal scholar Eugene Kontorovich. He's a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And guys, this is a historic moment. Bart, let's start with you. Iran's foreign minister saying with overnight strikes on Iran, there is no red line that the U.S. has not crossed. What do you expect to see next?
You know, anything the Iranian foreign minister says today is undercut by the fact that when he flew to Geneva on Friday, he had to ask permission from the Israeli Air Force before he left his country, because their country does not control their airspace. The Israeli Air Force controls their airspace. He's flying to what did you say, Russia today? That's from Geneva. We'll see whether Israel allows him to fly home again. He may become a foreign minister without a country soon. He will say everything he says. There's a great saying in Arabic, the dogs bark and the caravan passes. The Iranian regime has become the dogs barking in the desert, while the caravan toward peace, toward the Abraham Accords, toward normalization with Israel is moving, is gathering strength, and nothing they say will be able to stop it.
The people of Israel right now, I would imagine, are somewhat on edge.
I think that I think they've got to be on edge when the easiest party for Iran to retaliate against, the nearest party, is Israel. But they are rejoicing because the greatest threat to world peace has been nuclear weapons in the hands of the Ayatollahs. And the single greatest threat to Israel has been the prospect of a nuclear weapon being detonated over Israel. And that threat seems to be now removed.
We're also now going to bring in retired Colonel Grant Newsham. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of the book, When China Attacks. Grant, welcome to the discussion here. I guess my first question, Grant, is put this into historical context, this moment right now, for our viewers. Just over the past few decades, we've seen Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. What is this moment in historical context? What does it represent? How big is it?
Well, this is a big deal. We've been at war with Iran for 46 years, and most people aren't old enough to remember that. I am. And that is not an overstatement. The Iranian regime has been attacking us, killing Americans, backing proxies who do their dirty work for them and do their dirty work on their own. They blew up the Marine barracks in 1983 in Lebanon. They murdered CIA Station Chief Bill Buckley, tortured him, videotaped it, and sent it along to the US government to look at. They blew up the Israeli embassy in Argentina and a Jewish cultural center. Most of these very deadly explosive penetrators in Iraq that killed and maimed a few thousand Americans all came from Iran. They have been doing this nonstop, 46 years, and no administration has ever done anything to stop them, not one, until it finally took a real estate man from Queens to get into the White House and finally do something. And Trump won. He killed the Soleimani, the IRGC boss, and now finally he said, enough's enough. And all of the diplomats, all of the whiz kids, the best and brightest, couldn't figure out how to handle Iran. And finally, Mr. Trump has. Now, this is just the beginning, however. This isn't necessarily an end of anything. But if you've been watching it this long and seen how the Iranians have gotten away with everything, and in fact, the Biden administration, the Obama administration, couldn't do enough to placate them. We're talking tens of billions of dollars passed to the Iranians thinking that would moderate behavior. So Mr. Trump didn't do this lightly, but it is interesting that this is the first time that this sort of force has been used against Iran. And I would note that it was the Israelis who peeled away this supposedly invincible air defense in Iran that made it so the Americans could fly in without much to worry about. But this is serious business. And as I said, it's nice to see it turn out this way, but this is not the end of anything. There's still a ways to go for this. But finally, 46 years, somebody has stood up and said enough's enough.
We also have Eugene Kontorovich, who's back with us here, Heritage Foundation Senior Research Fellow. Eugene, you're based in Jerusalem right now. Talk to us about what the feeling is inside of Israel, as previously mentioned, the closest potential attack point right now for Iran if it does decide to retaliate to these major strikes.
So Israelis are an extremely resilient people, and despite daily missile attacks on major Israeli cities, life is going on pretty much as normal. The cafes are open, people are walking around the streets, and I'd say the mood is extremely positive because the shadow of Iranian nuclear weapons has hung over Israel for decades. Iran has two mottos: death to America and death to Israel, and Israel's a lot closer. So it's an enemy of both, and Israel is much more vulnerable. And Iran, of course, has been behind, just like it's been behind decades of attacks on Americans, it has been behind decades of attacks on Israel. It has supported the Hezbollah militia in Lebanon, which has shot missiles constantly into Israel, the Assad regime, and of course, Hamas. And so the sense in Israel is this is an appropriate beginning of closing the chapter that began on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas, then joined by Hezbollah, attacked, invaded Israel, committed an extraordinary massacre. And they did this all with Iranian support and foreknowledge. So now, Israel, having taken out Hamas, or greatly degraded Hamas, having taken Hezbollah, apparently, at least off the field, and brought about the end of the Assad regime, is finally going after the head of the snake. This is like the moment where, at the end of the game, you fight the arch villain. And this is what Israel has been waiting for years.
Now, we did see those B-2 stealth bombers that were reportedly heading to Iran from the United States just ahead of this strike. Is that something that's impossible to avoid, or was the element of surprise not needed, or is President Trump that unpredictable that even if they were on the way, it could have been used as a leveraging tactic? Grant, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it was an impressive feat of operational security. One sort of had the impression that nobody in Washington in the last 30 years has been able to keep a secret. People knew something could be happening, so this diversion of sending B-2s to Guam, that was useful. And you do find that people tend to get overly focused on what Mr. Trump is actually saying, rather than what he might be doing behind the scenes. And that works to his advantage, to our advantage, when people get deceived. Or he uses deception effectively. You always want to hit by surprise. Even if you've got supposed air superiority, you always want to have the other guy sort of wake up and say, oh man, I didn't see that coming. And that's what they were able to pull off. And I say it was a very effective approach. And also one notes, as I said, that this was very good to see the Pentagon keeping a secret. You remember all of the fussing not so long ago about the Pentagon and National Security Council allowing a journalist onto a supposedly confidential group telephone call. And there was talk about, oh, these are the amateurs, they don't know what they're doing. Well, this was a pretty impressive act of keeping a secret on the U.S. side. But it was necessary, and they did a good job of it.
Now, we are just moments away from a briefing at 8 a.m., and we're going to be sure to bring you that as soon as it does come any moment now. You can see the reporters all gathering there, ready to ask questions and hear what those two officials have to say. In the meantime, Bart, to one of Eugene's previous points, when it comes to these proxies, whether it be Hezbollah, Hamas, in hindsight, you have seen Israel take unprecedented action on both of those groups to really weaken them. Was that part of a bigger plan to get to where we are ultimately at now, do you think, in hindsight?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think we foresaw this when we woke up on the morning of October 7th and saw what Hamas had done. We knew instinctively, those of us who've been observing the region for a long time, what Prime Minister Netanyahu said. He said, nothing is off the table. Nobody will stop us. We will not listen to anybody. We will destroy the people that committed this act and that are responsible for this act. And they've been going layer by layer, tentacle by tentacle, dismantling the octopus, dismantling the apparatus of absolute hatred toward Israel and hatred toward not just America and the West, but toward civilization. The people who run Iran are people that think that the glory of world history happened between 650 and 900 AD, and they want to return to those years. And they hate modernism, they hate liberalism. By liberalism, I mean freedom and openness and tolerance, and they want to destroy it. And Israel had to go after them piece by piece before they could go to the head of the snake or the head of the octopus. Choose your metaphor.
Eugene, what's your reaction to Bart there, and what other, I guess, ripple effects will we see from these strikes within the region? Are we going to start to see more of these Arab nations perhaps get on board with Israel and the United States when it comes to the Abraham Accords, or could this create a further wedge?
No, absolutely. I think champagne is being popped in Riyadh as we speak. They're not going to drink it publicly. But Iran is, the greatest enemy of Arab states in the region. Iran has colonized, burrowed in to Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Gaza, with extraordinarily destructive consequences for all those countries, fostering civil war, fostering tyranny, and poverty and backwardness. and other Arab countries are very happy that this threat, this imperial threat of an imperial Persia, is being lifted from them, and I think they're going to see Israel as a credible ally, someone who can provide security in the Middle East. And there's a saying around here that Iran, which has been so hostile to Israel, Iran has been ready to fight the Zionists down to the last Arab. That is to say, to use Arab proxy militias to do their dying for them. And now the fight is actually coming to their doorstep. I think the Arab people of the Middle East are delighted by this.
We're going to go back to the Pentagon here and take a look and see, as we await Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, as well as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, as they take the podium now. Let's take a live look at them.
Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities in Iran, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, in order to destroy or severely degrade Iran's nuclear program. And as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs will demonstrate, it was an incredible and overwhelming success. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused, it was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program. But it's worth noting the operation did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people. For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump. The operation President Trump planned was bold and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not even close. Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it. This is not the previous administration. The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. He sent out a truth last night saying this: any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed tonight. Signed, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Iran would be smart to heed those words. He's said it before, and he means it. I want to give recognition to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Joint Staff, General Eric Kurilla at CENTCOM, who did a phenomenal job, he and his staff, all of CENTCOM. Policy across the board. This was a joint effort, and across the Pentagon effort. I want to recognize the pilots who flew those bombers, who flew those fighters, who flew those refuelers, warriors. I want to recognize the sailors on those destroyers, in those subs, on those carriers, warriors, all of them. I want to recognize our soldiers doing air defense, base defense, QRF, warriors, all of them. Every American involved in this operation performed flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision, It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security. Our B-2s went in and out of downtown Tehran, of these nuclear sites, in and out and back without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. A strike that included the longest B-2 Spirit bomber mission since 2001 and the first operational employment of the MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator. The mission demonstrated to the world the level of joint and allied integration that speak to the strength of our alliance and our joint forces. As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war, but let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word. I want to give congratulations to our Commander-in-Chief. It was an honor to watch him lead last night and throughout, and to our great American warriors on this successful operation. God bless our troops. God bless America. And we give glory to God for his providence and continue to ask for his protection. I turn it over now to the chairman for specifics.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for recognizing all of our folks out there doing our nation's work, and nice to see everybody on this early Sunday morning. Last night on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force. I want to thank every service member, planner, operator that made this mission possible. Their actions reflect the highest standards of the United States Armed Forces. This operation was designed to severely degrade Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure. It was planned and executed across multiple domains and theaters with coordination that reflects our ability to project power globally with speed and precision at the time and place of our nation's choosing. This was a highly classified mission with very few people in Washington knowing the timing or nature of this plan. I'll refer you to the graphic on the side as I walk you through some of the operational details. At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa. The main strike package, comprised of 7 B-2 Spirit bombers, each with 2 crew members, proceeded quietly to the east with minimal communications. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications. This type of integration is exactly what our joint force does better than anyone else in the world. At approximately 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time last night, and just prior to the strike package entering Iran, a U.S. submarine in the Central Command Area of Responsibility launched more than 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles against key surface infrastructure targets at Isfahan. As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats. The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command. As the strike package approached Fordow and Natanz, The U.S. protection package employed high-speed suppression weapons to ensure safe passage of the strike package, with fighter assets employing preemptive suppressing fires against any potential Iranian surface-to-air threats. We are currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in. At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordow. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against 2 nuclear target areas. All 3 Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Isfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation. Following weapons release, the Midnight Hammer strike package exited Iranian airspace and the package began its return home. We are unaware of any shots fired at the package on the way out. Iran's fighters did not fly, and it appears that Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not see us. Throughout the mission, we retained the element of surprise. In total, U.S. forces employed approximately 75 precision-guided weapons during this operation. This included, as the president stated last night, 14 30,000-pound GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, marking the first ever operational use of this weapon. I know that battle damage is of great interest. Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction. More than 125 U.S. aircraft participated in this mission, including B-2 stealth bombers, multiple flights of 4th and 5th generation fighters, dozens and dozens of air refueling tankers, a guided missile submarine, and a full array of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as hundreds of maintenance and operational professionals. As the Secretary said, this was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11. Well prior to the strike, General Kurilla elevated force protection measures across the region, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority. This mission demonstrates the unmatched reach, coordination, and capability of the United States military. In just a matter of weeks, this went from strategic planning to global execution. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military. As the president clearly said last night, no other military in the world could have done this. I join the president and the secretary in being incredibly proud of the air crews, naval forces, cyber operators, planners, and support teams, and commanders who made this mission possible. It is their skill, discipline, and teamwork that makes this operation possible. I am particularly proud of our discipline related to operational security, something that was of great concern to the President, the Secretary, General Kurilla, and me, and we will continue to focus on this. As we stand here this morning, many assets are still airborne, and we have hundreds deployed. I ask that we keep our warfighters on their way home and our deployed service member in our thoughts. Our joint force remains ready to defend the United States, our troops, and our interests in the region. Thank you very much.
We will take a few questions, Phil.
Me?
Yeah.
So, is regime change off the table, Mr. Secretary? And to the chairman, you said the battle damage assessment is still ongoing, but do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission was not and has not been about regime change. The president authorized a precision operation to neutralize the threats to our national interests posed by the Iranian nuclear program and the collective self-defense of our troops and our ally Israel.
Thanks for your question. I think BDA is still pending, and it would be way too early for me to comment on what may or may not still be there. But thanks for the question.
Green. No, behind you.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, was there a particular moment when the president decided to pull the trigger on this operation where he said, now, rather than being, something in the holster, now we're going to pull the trigger on it?
I would just say, having the opportunity to witness his leadership, he was fully committed to the peace process, wanted a negotiated outcome, gave Iran every single opportunity, and unfortunately was met by stonewalling, which is why he gave them plenty of time to continue to come to the table and give up enrichment, give up the nuclear program. But there was I won't say the particular moment, there was certainly a moment in time where he realized that it had to be a certain action taken in order to minimize the threat to us and our troops. Yeah.
General, you say that General Kurilla increased force protection in Iraq, Syria, and Gulf, in those areas. Were they given any advance warning the attacks were coming? And also, Mr. Secretary, when were congressional leaders notified? How long before the attacks took place?
Sure. To your first question, the risk has clearly been rising over the last few weeks in the region. Based on that, and not a particular awareness of this operation, we've made smart decisions to minimize the risk to U.S. forces in the region.
So they were given no advance warning?
No, sir.
And congressional?
They were notified after the planes were safely out. Well, we complied with the notification requirements of the War Powers Act.
The attacks, they were notified?
They were immediately thereafter. Yes.
Thank you, Secretary. Two quick questions. Do you believe you completely destroyed Iranian nuclear program? And how about Iranian ballistic missiles? Your ally as Israel always saying that is biggest threat. And second question is very important. What will be your next step if Iran or militias under Iranian influence in the region attack U.S. interests or allies in the region?
And you can chime in on this too, Mr. Chairman. The battle damage assessment is ongoing, but our initial assessment, as the chairman said, is that all of our precision munitions struck where we wanted them to strike and had the desired effect, which means especially in Fordow, which was the primary target here, we believe we achieved destruction of capabilities there. Ultimately, wherever it may be, whether it's in Iraq or Syria or bases in the Gulf, as the president said, it would be, as the chairman said, it would be a very bad idea for Iran or its proxies to attempt to attack American forces. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Regarding retaliations, Iran and North Korea are cooperating on nuclear and missile development. Do you think there is a possibility that Iran, North Korea, and the other forces, such as China, will join forces to retaliate against the United States?
Well, unfortunately, because of the policies under the previous administration, we drove those countries together, and ultimately that creates a challenging environment. For this particular operation, the focus is on Iran and Iranian nuclear capabilities. That's our focus here, is to not just say that they can't have, but President Trump has said from over 20 years, frankly, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And ultimately, he decided this is the moment, given their stonewalling, when direct military action had to be taken to prevent that from happening. Yes?
Thank you very much. General Kane, I understand OPSEC, I respect OPSEC. Can you say at all what security procedures are being taken to protect U.S. troops in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And Secretary Hegseth, as a global war on terrorism veteran, what do you say to veterans who may be concerned the U.S. is getting into another open-ended war in the Middle East over weapons of mass destruction?
Thanks, sir, for the question. I won't comment on what force protection measures are being taken in the region. What I will say is we're being proactive and not reactive, and being very thoughtful about ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our forces out there.
And I would just say, as the president has directed and made clear, this is most certainly not open-ended. It doesn't mean it limits our ability to respond. We will respond if necessary. The most powerful military in the world is postured and prepared to defend our people. But what the president gave us, as I said, was a focused, powerful, and clear mission on the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities. Those were the targets. That's what was struck. That's what was overwhelming. That's what was overwhelming. That's what the Iranian regime needs to understand, as the president put out last night. He wants peace. There needs to be a negotiated settlement here. We ultimately demonstrated that Iran cannot have a nuclear capability. That is a very clear mission set on this operation. Yes, hold on. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Question for the Secretary and the Chairman. How was this strike coordinated with the Israelis on a strategic level, militarily, and on a tactical level? Was there any direct Israeli military participation in this operation?
Well, I would say certainly Israel had an incredible military success, especially at the beginning and ongoing, in degrading Iranian capabilities, in degrading Iranian launchers, MRBMs. It's been incredible to watch what our ally Israel has been able to do. And there certainly have been conversations. I mean, General Kurilla at CENTCOM has worked closely in the defense of Israel for many years. And part of this operation was the defense of Israel and the ongoing defense of Israel. But as it pertains to this strike, this was U.S. operated and U.S. led.
We took advantage of some of the preparatory work that's been done over the past week and a half in terms of axis of approach. I won't get into the particulars, but as the Secretary said, it was a U.S. strike. We made sure we were not in the same piece of airspace and sky. Aside from that, that was the extent of it.
We'll take a couple more. Yeah, right there.
Question to the Secretary first. Are you concerned whatsoever now about the reaction from U.S. allies given the strike, particularly those in the Gulf? And to the Chairman, if I may, I understand you don't want to speak to specific assets and force protection measures, but do you anticipate at least having to bring in any further assets from other theaters to aid in force protection over the coming days?
We certainly understand the challenges of allies in the region, and we have been respectful and in working in collaboration with them as it pertains to basing and sensitivities there. Ultimately, they've got a lot of assets and people in those locations also where American troops are co-located. So that's a consideration of ours. We've been in close consultation with them, and we appreciate the support that we have got.
Thanks for the question on sort of the global picture. And as you know, that's one of my jobs, is to look globally at the entire range of challenges. We are always carefully considering our force posture around the world, and then offering options to the Secretary and to the President. I won't comment on any future things, but the American people should know that we carefully consider those moves around the world and try to modulate as needed our force structure in the region.
Absolutely. Yeah, right here.
Thank you. What communications are being sent to the Iranians right now, and is there any possibility of diplomacy now or in the coming days?
I can only confirm that there are both public and private messages being directly delivered to the Iranians in multiple channels, giving them every opportunity to come to the table. They understand precisely what the American position is, precisely what steps they can take to allow for peace, and we hope they do so. Yes.
The president may not want an open-ended conflict. The Iranians may disagree. Are you prepared for a protracted war?
Well, Anything can happen in conflict, we acknowledge that, but the scope of this was intentionally limited. That's the message that we're sending. With the capabilities of the American military nearly unlimited. So Iran, in that sense, has a choice. But we've made it very clear to them, this is nuclear sites, this is nuclear capabilities, this is the line that the president set, and we set that back. Now is the time to come forward for peace, but I think one of the takeaways from this as well is the unprecedented level of ongoing cooperation. I can't speak highly enough of the chairman and his staff and General Kurilla in CENTCOM, what they've done to look around the corner, to pre-position, to understand how an operation like this comes together. The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time. And I think Tehran is certainly calculating the reality that planes flew from the middle of America in Missouri overnight, completely undetected over 3 of their most highly sensitive sites, and we were able to destroy nuclear capabilities. And our boys in those bombers are on their way home right now. We believe that'll have a clear psychological impact on how they view the future, and we certainly hope they take the path of negotiated peace. But I could not be more proud of how this building operated, of the precision, the sensitivity, and the professionalism of the troops involved in this effort. I will take one more. We'll take one more question. Yes, right there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khomeini has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you have any of the WC-135s up to check the radioactive material?
And there you have it as the press conference wrapped up there with Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, as well as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, addressing the public after what they've dubbed Operation Midnight Hammer, where you had multiple stealth B-2 bombers dropping bombs and destroying targets inside of Iran. They're called MOPs. That was the name of the bomb, MOP, Massive Ordnance Penetrative Weapons. It was the first operational deployment ever of such a bomb. First time that the stealth bombers have been called into action since 2002. As you can see, listening to the two officials there, the highest military officials in the United States, talking about how it was executed. And one major thing as we bring back our guests is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs talked about the highly classified nature of this operation, saying very few in Washington knew about it. There's been discussion of the president's ODNI seeing things differently. I guess we'll start by getting reaction to what we heard about the extent and success of Operation Midnight Hammer. Both Secretary Hegseth and Chairman Kane speaking about the ability to keep discipline in operational security. In other words, no leaks. How big of an accomplishment was this, especially in a town that leaks quite a bit? Bart Marcois, we'll start with you.
I think that's one of the more extraordinary political facets of this operation. I'm not sure I've ever seen anything that was this tight in my 30 plus, almost 40-year career in Washington. The the one leading indicator that I think every intelligence agency in the world will focus on for the rest of foreseeable history is the pizza takeout place in Pentagon City. Everybody saw that the takeout orders increased massively a couple of days ago, and we're talking about it on social media. That was the one thing that didn't lie. All of the other deception was useless. If the Iranians had just paid attention to the Pentagon war planners ordering pizza late at night and staying late at night, they would have known something big was coming.
And Grant Newsham, I would like to get your thoughts. We saw a question raised there by a Korean journalist talking about other regions and how they might be affected. You being based in the Pacific, in charge of intel for the Marine Reserve for quite some time in the Pacific, talk to us about what you're sensing with this move. Might it bring Iran closer to, say, North Korea and China, as that journalist asked?
Well, I think China is probably the big connection to consider. And I think the Chinese look at what just happened, and that causes them to recalculate. I think it causes them some real concern. Yes, the Americans have had to distract or send some resources to the Middle East, and it is a distraction. So it diverts from paying attention to the Western Pacific and Taiwan and Northeast Asia in particular. But at the same time, what you saw was a demonstration of will. And I think the Chinese have thought for a long time that America just doesn't have what it takes. If they make a move and tell the Americans, you stand clear or it's World War III, well, they're dealing with somebody in the White House who's got plenty of will, it looks like. Additionally, just the operational the demonstration of operational skill was impressive. And you have to wonder, if you've got an air defense system that is ultimately based on Russian technology, well, just how good is it? So those are things that I think are going to cause the PRC to pull back a bit from what they might have been intending. And you're also seeing a demonstration of ultimately their sort of lack of influence in the Middle East when it comes down to it. Ultimately, their presence is a commercial one. And it hasn't really manifested itself in great political influence. And they're saying that they don't have many good options here for throwing their weight around, and particularly now, if the Americans actually do what they should and prohibit oil exports from Iran. Chinese buy about 90% of Iranian oil in violation of UN sanctions. So if this is a follow-on step by the Americans, the Chinese may not be too happy about what they've just seen, and I think it is going to cause them to recalculate. I think that isn't going to cause them to give up on their objectives, but it is something that I think the Chinese would wish it had turned out some other way, and rather than being an overwhelming operational success.
Grant, just to follow up, when it comes to China, as you know, a major part of war is also the information or the propaganda that comes from either side. Propaganda meaning propagating information about the narrative to that war. With the China-based TikTok and ByteDance, it's been a big issue in the United States, this application where tens of millions of young people, young minds in our country, Americans, are using this. Is there any concern? This has been banned in multiple countries, complete ban in India. It's been banned on U.S. government devices. President Trump has signed an extension to allow it to continue as he awaits some type of deal for it to be purchased by an American, but it's still in the hands, that algorithm of the CCP. Is there any concern as we enter a phase of messaging right now in public opinion that the CCP could be triggering the algorithm in TikTok to sway American sentiment toward these actions?
Well, there ought to be a lot of concern. I think the fact that the Chinese have been allowed to have this sort of medium that can broadcast 24/7 and get into the minds of Americans and let it operate is outrageous. It shows just how much influence the Chinese have bought with America's elite class that defends TikTok and it makes it so hard to ban the thing. So this is something that we really do need to be worried about. And there's going to be, of course, the usual suspects who blame America for provoking wars and say we're to blame for what we've had to do to Iran. And I would expect the Chinese to sort of push that message quietly and subtly, but nonetheless it could be effective. So as I noted, while this was very effective operationally, there's a lot more work to be done.
Eugene, I want to get your thoughts on sort of the China, Russia, North Korea nexus and some of the fallout or unintended consequences that may have driven them together from previous decisions, and what you expect to see coming out of that now. Will it stay status quo, or could we see them sort of converge in a more dangerous way?
Yeah, I mean, this is the traditional axis of evil. These are countries that wind up on the wrong side of the West, countries that are sanctioned, band together. But I think one thing we're going to see, and one thing that President Trump knows very well, and Prime Minister Netanyahu knows very well, is nothing succeeds like success. And the amazing success of both Israeli attacks and American attacks now on Iran makes Iran, the player you don't want to pick for your team, and whatever interest and advantage Iran might have provided Korea and North Korea and the Chinese Communist Party before, they're going to reassess, and Iran is a declining asset. We can see that Iran's own Shiite militias, Hezbollah, which is like Iran's strike force, which shares the same religion with them, is not picking up a gun to defend them. Iran has said, "Come, we made you for this moment. Come help us." They said, "We're sitting this one out," because they're afraid of being destroyed by Israel. I think China is going to understand that its future in the Middle East is going to be not as bright as it hoped, and this also sets the groundwork for IMEC, for Indian Mediterranean passage to cut across the Chinese Communist Party's Belt and Road Initiative and create really a trade path, a pro-American, pro-Western trade path that would also bring together the Middle East, countries of the Middle East, including Israel and the Arab countries, as well as India. So I think it's not great for the plans of the Chinese Communist Party, but I don't think they're going to double. They're smart. I doubt they're going to double down on their mistakes and invest more heavily in a poor ally.
Bart, to Eugene's point, the hope is that this would ultimately weaken some of the nefarious actors on the world stage in those alliances. But there was a question raised in the press conference toward the end there about a potential protracted war and what that might look like. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth did not rule that out. What might a protracted war look like regionally, but also if it were to extend into a nexus of North Korea, China, and Russia? And is that a concern that we should be watching for?
Well, I think everybody watching this, both Colonel Newsham and Eugene have made this point. Everybody in the world watching this realizes that there is a completely different America in charge now. This is the America that led the alliance, that won the Second World War and defeated fascism. This is the America that led the Western Alliance and won the Cold War and defeated communism. That America is back. And everybody is looking at it. One entity that nobody's mentioned so far is the United Nations. It's absolutely, I mean, it's shocking to me. Although I've grown to expect it. Secretary General Guterres wasted no time in condemning this and calling for peace. This is the same guy that waited more than 2 weeks to condemn the attacks of Hamas on October 7th. 2 weeks it took him to condemn that. And here in 2 or 3 hours, he condemns this attack, which is limited to destroying a nuclear program. You've got people like Francesca Albanese at the UN running around persecuting Christians who are trying to support peace in Israel and waging hate campaigns. Those people have got to be paying attention to it. and you have a new government in South Korea that is historically closely connected to North Korea and to China. They have got to be looking at this and reassessing their commitments and wondering what side they really want to be on. And finally, the Iranians and their proxies are looking at it. And I think that the people that have to pick up the rifles, or the people that are the sleeper agents and saboteurs that have to actually do something, are looking at it and saying, you know what? I don't think I want this fight. If they do, we've seen what will happen. It is American will that has been lacking for the past decades, not American capability. And with American will in the White House, there will not be a protracted war. Any conflict will be nasty, brutish, and short.
And Colonel Newsham, if you could, Secretary Hegseth did say American deterrence is back. What is the significance of this, particularly in terms of messaging to China and other would-be adversaries?
Well, I think there's been a sense for a long time now that America just can't finish the deal. You look at every fight we've gotten into, it seems as if we almost didn't want to win. We didn't want to do what was necessary. And that we would always back off. We would allow the other guy some oxygen, some room to sort of catch his breath, restore his capabilities and his strength. And we just weren't able to finish things off. And this is something very different than we've seen in the last really 40 years. So this is something that an adversary, an enemy of the United States had better take very seriously. And they may think, of course, well, we'll just wait it out. Maybe we'll get a more pliant administration next time. But it's 3.5 years. So this really, if you follow this from the beginning, and say, remember the first hostage rescue attempt in 1980, to see what happened today or yesterday really is something. But ultimately, it's a question of leadership and a willingness, actually, to, if you get into a fight, to finish it. And this is something that really we haven't seen for an awfully long time. And I would say it's about time. And the last thing I would note is that we had better be careful. This is to say it's always good to have a success, but there's problems that we may face in the United States, and we have to be ready for that. So there may be some tough times, but nonetheless, it's unprecedented in sort of recent times. And by that, I say 30, 40 years to see this level of commitment from a White House and a willingness to actually play rough to defend America's interests. And we'll see where this goes.
Eugene, to Colonel Newsham's point, President Trump in his first term, he often reminds people that there weren't any wars on his watch. He did take out the ISIS caliphate in record time with, actually, mind you, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time, right now chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but at the time in charge of that operation. So with that said, are we entering sort of uncharted territory if somebody were to instigate or, challenge the United States in such a way with President Trump's at the helm right now? To Colonel Newsham's point, could we see some type of action that is really unprecedented on any country that might try that, rather than giving them breathing room to prolong a conflict?
Yeah, I think President Trump has proven something which I think some people were confused about, that make America great again does not mean make America not have a foreign policy or a military policy. That is to say, a great America is an America that is going to exercise strength and power in a way that will deter enemies. Now, this operation today showed a deep commitment to that. And that shows to the countries, nations of the world, that President Trump really means business. President Obama negotiated with Iran for a long time in order to enable them to have a nuclear weapons program, in fact. Right? When President Obama wanted to negotiate, it was a tool to empower Iran. When President Trump negotiated with Iran, it was actually to get rid of their nuclear weapons. And I think they didn't understand that. They thought, no, negotiations, that means we get a nuclear weapon at the end. And President Trump meant exactly what he said. He would not allow them to have nuclear weapons. I think it's very important also for the American public and the people in the world to understand what exactly is the danger of Iran with a nuclear weapon. What is so bad about that? Whether or not they would actually use it by launching it, the nuclear umbrella it would give them, the invincibility and untouchability would allow them to control much of the world's economy by charging essentially ransoms for going through the Persian Gulf, attack American troops throughout the Middle East, which they've already been doing with impunity. Everyone would be afraid to retaliate. And this would be a situation in which America would be not just not great, but it would be a sort of great power theoretically that would be subordinate and essentially taking orders from the mullahs in Tehran without any possibility to stand up for itself because of the fear of a nuclear strike. So President Trump is not going to do this for any kind of foreign policy, for just some foreign policy disagreement. And he's not saying we're going to attack countries whenever we have differences of opinions. But if there's going to be a threat to the United States that is so substantial and essentially irreversible, then America will take action. And I think this is going to be taken very seriously by the countries of the world.
And just to say right now, we've had excellent commentary from all of our folks here. Bart Marcois, I know that you're up against it right now and you're going to have to leave us. We really appreciate your time. Bart, thank you so much. We are going to continue here with our panel as we have Colonel Grant Newsham as well as Eugene Kontorovich, Heritage Foundation Senior Research Fellow, discussing the Pentagon briefing that we just saw with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane. The Secretary did say that Trump offered peace and Iran did not take it. What do you think Iran's goals ultimately are? And is there a possibility that they may be interested in talking and taking a peace deal? Colonel Newsham.
Well, you'd think that after 45 years of empirical evidence, one would get some sense of how the Iranians think and what their intentions are, and also how serious they are about cutting a deal of the sort that we would want them to, what we would want. And we expect a different kind of regime that are actually going to, well, not kill people, not back terrorism all around the world, not constantly say they're going to kill us, and actually mean it. And there's really no discussions that you can have that are going to actually reform that regime, I'm afraid. It'd be nice if there were, but as I said, after almost half a century, one kind of gets the idea of what the other side thinks, what it wants. So yes, you can talk, but it would require, I think, such a fundamental change and shift in that regime that has really oppressed Iran for decades. And it's almost as if people now think, well, there's something that's baked into Persia, that's baked into Iran that makes them act this way. There's just no other option. Well, I would suggest that there is very much another option. And actually, you got a sense of that in 2009, 2010, during the so-called Green Revolution, when Iranians were in the streets complaining about a rigged election. And they were having some success. And if the Biden administration had just given a little bit of moral encouragement, I think that might have actually made some big changes. But they didn't. They squandered the opportunity. But the point here is that Persia can do better than this. The Iranians can do better than this. But with this regime in power, I'm not so sure that any sort of talking is going to actually lead to the result we want. It is good to have sort of an offer out there saying, look, if you want to get along with people, fine. But after this long, I'm not sure this regime is capable of it.
Eugene Kontorovich, we often hear from folks that Iran, of all countries in the Middle East, is actually most aligned, has been prior to 1979, with Western values, very European. Are the Iranian people primed and ready for a change?
Absolutely. So unlike countries like Iraq and Syria, so Iraq, before we took out Saddam Hussein, had a history in its independence of nothing but coups and dictators, coups and dictators. Iran has had a pro-Western liberal government that did not cover women up with burqas and execute people for morality crimes. And those people are still there. They're still living in Iran, subjugated by the mullahs. And so they have a lot more history and a lot more culture of successful political governance to fall back in than say than say neighboring Iraq. Also, we know one of the reasons Iraq has been a failure in its post-regime change, post-Saddam Hussein model is exactly because of Iran. So the removal of Iran from the picture is also going to make neighboring regimes more stable. But certainly there are many better alternatives for the governance of Iran. Now, that's something only really the people of Iran can do. Some of the Israeli strikes have actually been on the secret police and internal police bases and facilities that repress Iranians, to give Iranians some more room to rise up. But those kind of processes, I don't think you're going to see overnight. That's something, I think if this war were to end tomorrow, it would seem that it would end with the regime in place. But something like this is going to expose deep fissures and, the weakness of the regime in a way which may make its unraveling a matter of time.
Colonel Newsham, what would you say the full array of factors, that President Trump was weighing in terms of deciding to strike or not? Some have been making the argument, and we've heard it again from a reporter during that press conference, that Iran wasn't building nuclear weapons or wasn't close to having them. Secretary Hegseth did shut that down, but could there be other reasons, that he may have done this? And did it really matter if they were 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years away, ultimately, knowing what their end goal was?
Yeah, I don't mean to be snide, but I've never seen anything in the last 30 years which suggests the CIA knows how to spy. It appears that they've got very little access to what's really going on in Iran. So one sort of feels a little sorry for the president having to rely on them. But nonetheless, the evidence is there, the information is there. And I think it was a sort of a calculation that if you don't do it now, if you don't take these steps, that it will be either impossible or incredibly costly once the Iranians do get nuclear weapons. And it would just be a question of time. Ultimately, it's an engineering problem. The Iranians are quite capable of developing these weapons. So whether it was 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 years, the idea of an Iran that has nuclear weapons and that gives it almost a sort of protection from doing anything, and as was mentioned, allowing them to sort of dominate the region and sort of hold everyone hostage and potentially use it against us and also use it against Israel. And I am convinced they would use it if they could, but just the United States as well. I think Mr. Trump saw, President Trump, when I use the word Mr. from where I come from, it's a very polite way of referring to somebody. I think he saw that if we don't do it now, we will pay for it later. And it was, in my opinion, it was a tough decision. I think it was the right one. But you do get, so when you follow something for 45 years, you do get some ideas about it. But Mr. Trump, with a businessman's savvy and I think a love for the United States, and knowing that this would not be politically popular in a lot of places, I think he went ahead with it. And the idea is it's sort of like if you need a root canal, it's usually better to get it done at once and not just take a slug of vodka and hope that things get better. It just gets worse. And I think he went ahead and did it.
Eugene, thinking back to Trump 1.0, one of the most significant parts of that presidency was the way that he dealt with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, the fire and fury like the world has never seen before. My button is bigger than yours. A lot of rhetoric that eventually wound up in de-escalation and the two forming some type of mutual understanding, meeting. Talk to us about what you think the difference is between, say, an Iran and a North Korea.
North Korea is a hermit kingdom. It is inwardly looking. It looks abroad to destabilize regional enemies and to make money. But Iran is religiously inspired by some kind of messianic end of times vision, which leads them to seek a nuclear bomb and as part of a really end times kind of story, which is going to see some kind of second coming of one of their imams. And this is the kind of thing that's much harder to deter. You need to actually stop it. Right? What Trump is doing is not scaring them; he's taking away their tools. And when a regime's slogan is "Death to America," that they mean it. And when they're also just more able and capable than North Korea. They're a much more serious threat. They're much more advanced. They're economically more developed, and that makes them much more of a threat. And when you're building a nuclear facility under 100 meters of mountain and concrete, it's very hard to say, this is a civilian program, right? We're just committed to the environment and we want to use, renewable fuels. That's a heck of a commitment to put under a mountain like that. I think it's quite clear what their goal is because they say it, and I think it's quite clear how they want to achieve it because it's quite visible under that mountain.
Well, Colonel Grant Newsham, Eugene Kantorovich, really excellent analysis. Greatly appreciate you both joining us. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and that does wrap up this morning's breaking news. We'll keep you updated on the situation with Iran as it continues to develop. NTD News Today will be taking over our coverage today at noon Eastern Time. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Steve Lance, and have a great day.